Hello and welcome to the NEWSPASTE Podcast with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore, and we are here with someone who, I met you, Charlie. I met you I would say quite early in my whole, like, sort of, I suppose I went across the Atlantic and visited the American neighbors all of a sudden. Because when I started with journalism, I was very in like this British scene. There was
Mhm.
British people, and that was all there was. And then started getting interviewed by a couple of people like Jason Bamas, and then zoom, it kind of like my whole focus like swept over the Atlantic, and I went over and I got to meet you quite early in that adventure. So, Charlie Robinson, my friend, for the people at home who don't know you, give them what you think they should know about you.
Well, uh, I,
You
st-
sounded Welsh then.
I, st-
Well, oh, I tell you what. Oh, go on. Sorry, you don't have to do in a Welsh accent.
I have a British sense of humor, though. I mean, I like it just all that sort of like, I grew up watching Benny Hill. I don't know.
Me too,
I,
brother.
I'm an author. Didn't mean to be. Had no intention to be. Didn't ever think I would be. But I had a conversation with my mom years ago, and I was telling her about all these great conspiracies that I had unearthed, right? Things that I'd just come across, real fascinating topics. And I was telling her about the latest one that I'd gotten into, and she said, this is amazing. It's really fascinating what you're finding. But what are you going to do about it? Like, what's the point of all this? And I didn't have an answer. I really didn't ever consider myself to be involved or have a role in it. I just was a consumer of it. And I I thought about that for a while, and I thought, well, what could I do? I could, I've been watching these great documentaries. I could make a movie, but I'm not really a movie maker. I don't know. I could write. I mean, I think I could write. I think I could explain. The, the point she was making was you have a way of explaining these really complex situations in a way that makes sense to people that don't have the background, that don't understand this stuff. You can explain it in a way that's funny and kind of insightful. And so I thought, well, with that I could write. I could probably write, I should maybe think about that. But I was very non-committal in the sense that I didn't tell anybody I was writing a book. It, the and there were two reasons for that. The first reason was because I didn't want to be on the hook for it. I didn't want to tell all my friends, I'm writing a book, man, and then have them like ask me a year later, how's that book coming? And I have to admit, well, I never finished it or I never got around to it or whatever. So I didn't want to have any expectations of it. And then about halfway through the writing process, it my reasoning changed for not wanting to tell anyone. I knew I was going to finish the book. There was no doubt about that. I was onto something, but I didn't want somebody to tell me to stop. I didn't want somebody to say, "Well, what do you? I mean, what do you think you're doing? You're going to go. What are you going to get this book published, and then what? Who's going to buy it? Nobody knows who you are. You're not a writer. You're not going to. It's the content that's not exactly like New York publishing houses are drooling over, right? It's government fuckery and stuff like that they don't want any part of. So I'm not going to get myself a book deal. I'd have to self-publish it. And I don't know anybody in the industry. There were a lot of reasons for people to tell me to stop, and I didn't want to hear it because they would have been right at that point. And I didn't have uh, a path towards this. I just knew if I write the book and then I talk to people and try and maybe get on some shows and explain what the book is about, I don't have to know how to get from A to Z. I just have to know how to get from A to B and then B to C, and it'll just unveil itself as the process sort of goes on. And I have a business degree, and so with my business degree, you do things like write business plans about a new project that you're going to do. And had I written a business plan about this, the writing books and doing podcasts and hosting an Acapulco and all that stuff, it would have sounded like the rantings of a lunatic, right? There's no path for any of this to happen. So I just kind of started down the road. I wrote the book, The Octopus of Global Control, during tail end of 2015, all of 2016, and it went out in 2017. And I started to go out and talk to people about it and start that process. I was very fortunate. I got connected with Richard Serrett, who does he was doing Conspiracies Unlimited at the time, I think, and I'd done his show. He had me on. It was the second interview I'd done. We had a really good talk. When we got done with it, he said, "This was great. This is fascinating. Would you want to come on my other show that I do? I don't do it all often. I do it like once a month. I'm the weekend host of Coast to Coast AM." I said, "Oh,
Coast to
you
coast.
kidding me? Yeah, I'd like to come on." So my third interview I did was a 3 hour one, Coast to Coast, where it was like, I don't know.
Isn't
I
that
mean, it was
from is that also from the name of the show in what's it called? MF Doom, the Danger Mouse, Coast to Coast. I'm pretty positive. I'm pretty positive it is.
well, it's a legendary show. It's a internationally syndicated. George Norrie did it for a while, and
Mm.
it's like millions of people listen to it. So I got spoiled. I mean, I got lucky, kind of. Again, you sort of put yourself in a position to get lucky, I suppose. But I got lucky and got out there. And then from that point, I just did as many podcasts as I could with other people and to try and get the word out. And so I became a writer because I just had a deep interest in this information and I felt like I could explain it in a way that people would connect with. And the writing turned into going on Tony Merkel's show. He has a show called The Confessionals, which is normally like Bigfoot and ghost stories, and he interviews people that have these supernatural paranormal experiences. And I really wasn't talking about that, but he wanted to talk about government corruption and whatnot. When we got done recording, he said, "Man, you should do a podcast." And I said, "Well, I mean, yeah, maybe, but like I don't really know the engineering part of it. All the tech side of it kind of gives me anxiety." He says, "Well, if you were
You're
interested
right to
in
have
doing one,
anxiety. Yeah.
yeah." Well, he says, "If you're interested in doing a show, I would do the back end for you. I mean, I could do all of the audio, video, all of that stuff. And if you were interested."
Sounds sexual.
Yeah, that costs extra. But
It sounds back
so
end
that
times
was
two.
when was that? That was the December of 2019
Mhm.
that we had that conversation. We just, okay, fine. We talked about it a little bit more. I said, "I'll do it." And we started the process, and macroaggression started in March of 2020. Coincidentally, right when COVID kicked off, and people were asking questions, and they had time on their hands. They weren't at work anymore. They were at home, not working, and that just kind of turned into this podcast. And he taught me some really good lessons right off the bat because he really took his show seriously. He said, you got to deliver on a certain, do it on Wednesdays. Wednesdays, the monologue goes out. Sundays, the interview episode go out, and you cannot miss a date. You miss one, everyone will assume you're dead, and they'll move on to somebody else. So you gotta you
It's
gotta be
true. It's
consistent.
true.
And so
It's
he
true.
taught me some good habits about that, and the podcast became a nice little filler. I mean, as somebody who was writing books, it's such a long process, and so much happens in between that writing process that you'd love to kind of talk about something current, but you can't necessarily because it changes so quickly. But the podcast gave me an opportunity to do that, to have a more, to reach out twice a week, and I could cover more current events and also deep events, that things that were maybe not so time specific, but the pod, and then by doing the podcast and writing books, I wound up hooked up with Jeff Berwick from the Dollar Vigilante, and we did a episode of his show, The Anarchast. And when we got done, he said, "Would you want to write a book together?" And I
Controlled
said,
demolition of the American Empire.
"Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah." That turned into, he said to me during that conversation when we weren't recording, he said, "It's all coming down." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, like the banking system and everything. I go, "Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, that's all."
Everything, my friend.
Yeah,
Everything.
exactly. Could you be more specific about what's coming down? So he said, "I have some ideas." He sent me an email with some ideas that he had, and I replied back to him and I said, "Jeff, that last comment you made to me about it all coming down really kind of struck me. It made me think, like, like a building, like a controlled demolition. I said, what if we made the comparison between how the system, the empire, comes down in sort of, paired it with the way you would take down a building. Oh, I don't know, like
I can't
World
even
Trade
imagine
Center
what you're going
7,
to say now. Oh my God.
like a 47-story glass and steel
You got
high-rise
it,
building.
said it. The
Yeah.
sensors are coming in. I can hear them.
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry. Um, so I said, so and I laid out this whole long kind of like explanation. We could do this and this and this, and I sent it over to him. I remember he just sent me a one sentence answer. I like your idea better. Like, good. All right. So that became the controlled demolition of the American Empire that we wrote, and we put that out the Friday before the election in 2020, the selection in 2020. It became a number one bestseller in the U.S. and Australia on election day, which was great. Jeff spent that Friday when it got released. He spent that Friday in a Mexican jail for
Oh
swinging at a
yes.
cop, which
No.
was funny. It's on video. It's great. He,
Swinging.
you know,
So he was asking to swap wives.
he was a bit fired up at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. I can imagine.
He was out having a couple drinks,
I
and
can't
and,
blame a
and it,
man.
it happened.
Yeah.
It was kind of par for the course though. I mean, I was like, oh, it's perfect. Don't worry about it, man. It's good. But he's got a great team behind him too, and we launched that book, and put the word out, and it was very well received. We were very pleased with the results of that, and then I put out a third book, which I just did a second edition. It's out now. Hypocrisy: Surviving in a World of Cultural Double Standards. I got Uncle Sam wrapped up in the pride flag, sort of. So it's been books and podcasts until just recently, until the summer of 2024, when I got an email out of the blue from the owners of Activist Post and Natural Blaze, and they said, we've been doing this for 15 years, and we're ready to do something else, and it matters to us that Activist Post is in good hands and continues on, even if we can't do it. We want to find the right owner. Would you be interested in buying the websites?
Wow.
And I said no,
That's always what we
immediately.
do.
And then
No.
48 hours later, I was like, you know what? This is like, I didn't mean to be too like airy fairy about it and all, but like when the universe presents you with an opportunity like that, kind of out of the blue, it's your job to recognize it and
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to
seize it.
recognize it for most people. That's what make people doers and not doers.
Yeah, it's tough. And so I said, well, this is what I'm waiting for, I think. I mean, I didn't know it, but I think this is a good fit. And I signed the paperwork for it. And I remember we had conversations. I said, "Yeah, we'll do it." And we said, "Well, we should maybe draw up something like a one-page document." Like we were just about to do it without any documentation at all. He's like, "My partners would probably feel better if we just had one page." I said, "That's fine." So he sent it over. I signed it. I sent it back to him. I closed my laptop. I put it in my bag. I walked out the door, and I went to the airport and got on a plane to Las Vegas. And I was on my way to see my mom, to be with her when she got a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis. We were unsure what it was going to be. It turned out it was stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and that she was given 90 days to live. And so I was in Vegas. I had just made this commitment, and I thought, well, my life is about to change in a variety of ways. And I'm going to transition from having my mother on this planet to not. And I told them when we signed it, I said, I need 6 months. I can't do it. Can we like make this a January 1st thing instead of immediately? And they said, yeah, that would be great. So while I was there caring for my mom for 98 days in her apartment, I just moved in. I just didn't leave. I couldn't leave her. I was plotting, how are we going to redo Activist Post? Are we going to rebuild the website, and let's do that. And how do we want it? What are the categories that we
Got to get a
want?
man to do your back end for you.
Yeah, I needed, and again, yes, I did. I needed somebody who was
You needed.
technologically savvy, who could help build it out, and that's kind of what we did over that time. So it was a nice distraction from the unpleasant scenario I was living through, and it was really, I was feeling kind of inspired to to do it right
New
and to
stage of your
do it.
life type business. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 it's like
yeah.
new stage of your life completely. That's
Yeah. So that's what, so here I am now. I've written a couple books, I've done some podcasts, and now I'm in the news business, republishing news. I mean, we
so
don't have
we
like a stable of writers, but
so what you're going to do, you're going to keep, because you currently do a what do you call it, bi-weekly podcast. In that sense, is 2 days a week. Are you including that within activist posts? Are you kind of merging them together, or are you having to slow down on one of those?
no, I'm doing both at the same time. There's a bit of overlap. I think my audience for macroaggressions and the audience for activist posts is pretty similar. I
Dude,
mean, I
you
don't
run
know.
it.
I mean, it's
You
might not.
run it. Cheat. It's your time to cheat now.
Well, listen, I mean, there's certainly one of the things that I did is I added a podcast category too, because I know a lot of people are, some people don't necessarily get their information from reading it. Their
Mhm.
books or articles. I mean, I do, but not everybody does. And podcasts are a component that I didn't want to ignore. So in that regard, sometimes my episodes are winding up on activist post as well under the podcast category. I think it's some good sort of cross pollination. I think, but again, I think the people are roughly the same. They're interested in the same topics. Topics line up perfectly. I think that's why the previous owners of Activist Post were wanted to talk to me about it, because they're ideologically aligned with the way I see the world as well. And so it didn't seem like it was going to be any sort of issue. It was going to be pretty seamless. I mean, I'm not going to be censoring people. They weren't censoring people. That just goes against my whole ethos, like I'm not just, it just won't happen. And so we're about a month in, actually 30, yeah, we're a month in, to my new job. And I love it. It's like curating, I'm like the DJ who picks the music that everybody
Yeah,
hears,
it's
right?
kind of like what I wanted to do with NewsPaste right at the start. I wanted it to be like, well, the title, News and Paste and News, kind
Right.
of within there, and bring like some sort of aggregator. And I find it really exciting because then you have to delve into what everybody's up to and what everybody's
Yeah,
doing as well, and that forces you to. You must have a big read going on at the moment.
for sure. I'm lucky in that if I don't, I know a lot of the people whose articles I'm republishing, which helps because I know the quality of their work. I've known them for years, and it's my honor and privilege to republish their work. I mean, if their work is fantastic, that I could, you know, incorporate that into activist post is a huge bonus for me. And of course, I'm reading the articles. I was like, this is great. This is a good fit, and giving people a little variety within sort of a variety of opinions. I mean, I'm not going to. I'll put it this way: I'm not going to pretend like there's not a genocide going on in Gaza,
Hmm.
right? So I'm not
Hmm.
going to I'm not going to like censor that. And I had one of the
Yeah, there
writers
are clues.
one of the writers who had been writing for Activist Post she was extremely angry with me for publishing, the work of like anti-war and some of the people out there who are doing, who are putting out articles that are exposing what's actually going on in that war. And she was calling me a propagandist and an anti-Semite. I said, get the fuck out of here then. You go write somewhere else. Man, I don't want
Kind
you
of
around
art.
here
We
if you're
are
doing.
kind of I mean, propaganda is just information. Information, brother. It's just at the end of the day, we all have our point of view, and we want someone else to understand our point of view. So that's where it lies at the end of the day. So we are, to an extent, we all have our preferred side. I mean, you were at TNT before I came. Like our existence at TNT, we were like ships passing in the night.
Yeah.
We had a little conversation about it as well around that time. It was
Yep.
very interesting. It was a really nice experience for me. It was a lovely experience for me, but it's like I got to speak to people who I wasn't expecting to speak to,
Too.
and feel the kind of tension there that they no one knows which side everybody's on, and there's always like this like feeling of tension. I quite like that feeling.
I I would doing that live show, that TNT live, TNT radio. Well, it wasn't radio for very long. I mean, when I started there, I was doing the weekends. Had a Saturday morning show. It was like 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. my time. So I'd get up early on Saturday morning and have a 2 hour show. But it was radio. There was no video, and I'd have great conversations with people. And when the commercial breaks are, it was good for me to learn how to do that and expand my experience into, well, now I'm doing radio. But then it switched, and then they said, "Would you want to go?" Well, first of all, it's not going to be radio anymore. We're going to bring cameras in. And would you want to move this to a Monday through Friday role instead of just doing your Saturday show? It'd be Monday through Friday, and it was like noon to 1 p.m. my time that I would do this show. And I kind of liked how much anxiety I would get
Mm.
anxiety a little bit right before it kind of started, because you're watching it and you've got the earpiece in, and which is wild. You've got guys in the studio talking in your ear and telling you, your commercial break is coming up, or the show's about to start. And the live component of it really, I felt, made
Fruity, wasn't it?
me
Yeah,
sharp,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, kind of like you're scared into, being 100% fully present in the moment and trying to juggle different things. And the only reason why it went south for me was because they made I was going to say request, it's a demand, that instead of doing two guests an hour, I go to three guests an hour. And I said, why? I don't want to do that. First of all, I mean, my guests are coming on for a reason. They've got something to say. Let's let them talk. I mean, I don't want to do 11-minute segments. And I've got a guy who's coming in, and I'm worried that the next guy maybe isn't ready or in the waiting room. I'm rushing one person out so that I could talk to the next person for 11 minutes and get him out and get the new person. I don't want to do that. That's who's asking for that, right? So that's where my TNT experience came to an end. They said, "You're going to do three." I said, "The hell I am." And they said, "Tomorrow's your last day," which is not a good thing to say to somebody who's like me, who then goes on the air instead of being in like my nice, get up and everything and looking presentable. You give me one last day. That's where I wear the
You did it.
t-shirt that says "Do not comply"
You wear
across
your
the
furry
front, and I
gear.
I go out, middle fingers blazing and all. But um, I, I'm glad I did it. I'm really glad I went through that, because again, it was something I would never have thought to do, and to have, to do radio, and I felt like I was doing the news. Really, it was kind of like you do the
Mm.
top stories, and then you've got a break, and then you've got 3 minutes to this, and
I
I
had
felt
my
like I'm
ruckus,
like Bill
man. I
O'Reilly
had
in here.
like, yeah, it was awesome. I have a monologue to come on with the ruckus. Have a
Yep.
little bit of a conversation about the old news. I mean, ruckus is always good to have about a brilliant human being, really like just,
He was my guy too, and
yeah,
I
super
loved
pleasant to
Ruckus.
work with. He's like
Oh, for sure,
such a lovely guy.
a hundred percent.
Trendy too. He's a
He's
trendy
yeah,
boy.
he was great, man. He
Yeah.
I could always he'd do his little, 10 minutes of his news stories, and I would just be laughing the whole time, because I was like, oh, I was gonna do that story. You beat me to it. You know what I mean? I was
Yeah,
gonna
he's
cover
good.
that, but like we were thinking along the same lines. I really, really enjoyed that,
He
and
had a
and
lot of work. Oh my God! And when he was at TNT, he was having to do lots all of the time, keep his
yeah,
finger on that pulse, and he still does. I mean, the Daily Ruckus is like full of stuff. And all of those guys. It was really interesting, a really interesting mix of people. Um, I agree with you as well. That sort of, oh. having like someone telling you the time's coming in your ear and stuff like that. It's just like having people to talk with. It was as soon as it started, it was kind of a ride. It was just a boo 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 boo, and sometimes things would go terribly wrong throughout it. And those are some of the best times. It's just like
Yep.
yeah, anxiety, like that feeling of like trepidation about what's around the corner was brilliant. That was one of my favorite aspects to it too. Really, really, really good. So, what do you see yourself doing with Activist Post? What do you are you going to keep it the way it is, or are you thinking about expanding on it?
So for now, what we're doing is we want to make sure everything looks right and works well on mobile. We rebuilt the entire website to get it into to they called it heavy. The website was heavy. It had been around for 15 years. There's a lot of stories and a lot going on and like kind of an old website. So I said, well,
Hmm.
let's rebuild it from the ground up. Let's do a new one. Let's make sure it's very secure. Let's make sure it works well on mobile, since that's the direction everyone's going. And once we get that done, once we get everything kind of dialed in towards the tail end of this year, we want to do Activist Plus, which will be a premium
Mm.
component to it. And that'll have an opportunity for people that want deeper dives into particular topics, articles that are, written specifically for the Activist Plus audience, roundtables, panel discussion, things like that. Things that let's go a little bit deeper.
Mm.
Let's bring in some of the alternative media content creators and pay them for their work. If I'm going to be charging people to be a member for monthly or yearly, then let's take some of that money and make sure that we're paying the people who are contributing to the premium work. That to me will be the real victory. Is that if we can do that, and I don't know
That
why
would
we
be a game
couldn't.
changer. That would
It'd
be
be nice to put some money in people's pockets because you don't. I love what I'm doing, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. But I'd be lying if I said that there's a whole lot of money in the actual alternative media because there's
thing.
just it's just not. And so you have to you have to love it first and foremost, and it has to be sort of ideologically part of who you are as a person. Like I have to let people know about these topics because to not do so would be selfish and and maybe even destructive to not let people know. If I know something about how dangerous the pharmaceutical industry is and I keep that information to myself, what good am I? So
Uh,
I want to make sure that that gets out, and that's kind of how I'm wired. I think a lot of people in the alternative media feel the same way, but there's not, when you get into a situation where someone offers you a bunch of money, it usually comes with strings attached. And, well, you can't talk about this topic or you can't talk about that. Well, I'm not going to be doing any of that. And to the extent that we can grow a nice, take Activist Post from where it's been for the last 15 years, it's been one of the most important uh, independent news websites out there. It was one of the disinformation 200 that got whacked in 2016 with Zero Hedge and the Free Thought
Yeah.
Project and WikiLeaks and all that.
Well, these are
They
the
just,
ones that yeah, the neocons out of the German Marshall Fund are looking at. All the Alliance for Secure and Democracy have got their bloody little monocle on you, buddy. And
yep,
they're,
yep.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
they turn
best.
off your money, and it's amazing what they can do when they do that. So they strangled a lot of these people who were doing great independent news over the years. They throttled their reach and removed their advertising. If they were on, like if they were
Oh,
using the Google
man.
AdSense network, that got turned off. And
I got a
so
really like I have I have to say I had a really like early, very early on experience of that. I was like one of my biggest first articles was one about Theresa May's father and how he worked with just before the election. It was like a few days before the election, and I caught a sense of something. I was looking for something different to do, and Theresa May's was definitely going to win. By how much, who knows? But there was something about it. There was her father's Wikipedia page had been removed, and there was only one thing it'd been merged in with her page, and I found that very peculiar because he had done a few things, but there was like one image which showed he worked in Eastbourne Hospital as the main chaplain at one point while Dr. John Bodkin Adams, who was injecting people and having him put in their will just before he injected them, they die and he got their inheritance. He did it over 130 times. So he was like the Harold Shipman of his day. And he didn't even get charged for murder, even when they found out they did him for dodgy prescriptions and stopped him from practicing for like 10 years. And he had killed I think it's thought to be about 150 people in total, including a famous actress in the end. And I found that really, it was a brilliant story, especially as the fact that she was involved in the cover up of child sexual abuse, and he was from a diocese down in Eastbourne, down that way, where all of the majority of or a lot of the abuse being focused. And there was friends like Peter Ball, who was friends with Prince Charles and etc. down there, so it was all very interesting. And that story, like I released it. It got like 250,000 reads in a matter of a couple of days, and it was just like that was extraordinary to me because I hadn't had anything like that so far. But that was like proper reads, people going to the actual site to read it, and then and what was amazing is it was a stunning, deafening silence. So many people have read it, so many people have shared it. I was publishing it up on some no bit platform, yet not one mainstream platform, not even a tiny bit in a newspaper, nothing. And it was the best story in that election by far. It was the best story. And it made me realize very early on, 2017, like this is fitted up good. They have got it so the mainstream don't mention you. The main outlets that are pretending to be the alternative don't mention you. You just end up, it has to be the power of the people. It's themselves at that point to overcome the algorithm. And that's really super hard. So I learned
It
that
is hard.
very early on. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what Activist Post has been facing over the years was that, you're going to get no love or help from the algorithm at all. It's going to have to be 100% driven by the readers. And that's what I've asked the readers to please do that. If there's an article that you like, share it. You're going, that's your responsibility in this. You get the news for free, whatever. You go to the website and it's all there. But the role that the reader plays in it is extremely important of sharing
Yeah.
that with the people close to them, people that they think will connect with it, because we're going to get no help. And of course, the reason why we're going to get no help is not because we're unhinged lunatics that are ranting and raving about things that don't exist. It's precisely the opposite. It is because we are right over the target. They know it, we know it, and they don't want the general public to be aware of it. So they throttle you however they can, limit your reach, or cut off your money, or whatever. And so with this, I'm coming in with a sort of a clean slate. I don't owe anybody any money. There's I'm
Yeah,
not taking
you said that like spit it out. Money.
I don't I I
Dirty,
I don't
rotten scoundrels. I owe no one nothing.
yeah. I mean, you don't want to be on the hook to somebody to, and have them sort of dictate some sort of terms to it. And I think it's important to not be beholden to corporations or anybody who finances you. So I bought the company with all Bitcoin transaction. We just
Whoop.
settled it that way. And I'm happy to grow from here. And I've got sponsors for the show. They're a lot of the same sponsors that I've had for macroaggressions. They're brands that I know. I know the owners. They solve a problem. They're, if it's supplements that work, you know, that are engineered to be um, natural and without, like, chemical free body is one of my sponsors. There's no chemicals in their supplements. They're insane about that. I know Tim, the owner, he's a lunatic when it comes to that. He even to the point where he asked me, who does your merchandise? I said, well, this company over here. He goes, do they have like a organic cotton option? Like, I can't have any sort of chemicals or anything. I was like, dang, man, like even your shirts too. He's like, yeah, man, it's like it's everything, it's all got to be. I'm like, okay, good. I respect that. So like, I want to have brands around we got to make money. I'm not
I,
gonna say
I'm
that
I'm thinking
giving
about
some
this.
charity, but
And like so many when we going through the pandemic, so many of the big TV shows, the biggest TV shows, were all sponsored by Pfizer and the like.
yeah.
And when you get to the indie media, the more and more I saw them sponsored by the alternative, like the alternative big pharma. I don't know if are we going to call it little pharma.
Yeah.
What are we
It-
going to call it? Because it's like alternative pharma is has become a driving force for the other voice, and they may come to having some sort of parity at some point if the one continues to do what they're doing, and
Mhm.
I think there's no other way they can go. But I would think it's quite it's I was gonna say natural. It's a natural fit for this sort of stuff, especially like in a world which is everybody is so unhealthy. I'm watching the hearings for the nomination for RFK at the moment. Are you watching any of that?
Yeah, I watched him kind of spar with Bernie Sanders about Bernie's trying to call him out on something. He said, "You took more money than anybody from Big Pharma." Well, there's no, I didn't take anything from the executives. It was all from the people that were, oh, shut up. I mean,
Mm.
we know how this works. I mean, he's
Onesies.
insulting our
He's
intelligence.
arguing about onesies. That's what he was
Yeah, yeah,
arguing. Oh, you're selling onesies. You're
yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
you're selling countries. You're selling
You're
countries.
selling out your people.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, oh,
It's
it's
complicated though, because they're all stinky. That's my opinion.
yeah. I mean,
Politicians.
it's all gross. It's just a matter of degree,
So come on
suppose.
then. Let's get into a little bit of that. Like you go back to election time and for what how do you think it's been so far since it was announced that Trump's going to be president and now that he is?
Well, I've been thinking of it like one of those choose your own adventure books where you 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 get if you pick, like if Kamala was the choice, then you would have all the gender stuff and the tranny story time and the DEI and all of that, the Soros installed district attorneys and mayors and all these major cities would continue to their rampage. And so that is not an op that went away. And I'm glad it went away because
I think it
it
was
needed to go away. It
trending.
was
It almost died already, a natural death, surely.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And with Trump coming in, so on the one hand, am I glad that the Biden Harris regime didn't continue on? Oh, absolutely. I don't
it
I didn't
wasn't
I thought
even
that was
there. It wasn't
right.
even there, man.
No, he wasn't in, he was like a weekend at Bernie's scenario for
Amazing.
him.
Oh, what a
Um,
time to live.
and again, you would think that that would wake up a segment of the population to like, just look, the president isn't even there. He's physically, I mean, even when he's physically there, he's not mentally there. Shit his pants with the Pope, for God's sakes. I mean, my God. So it's like the whole thing
I
was very
might
so
do that too.
preposterous. I mean, as a writer,
Mhm.
for us, it's like an embarrassment of riches. Like where do I even start? Yeah, I could
Yeah,
cover
yeah.
all of this. But with Trump, and I'm no fan of Trump, I don't like any of these people. He, Ending that and sort of pivoting to the new adventure in your choose your own adventure book is now, well, great. We got rid of the drag queens, but now we have technocracy creeping in. Now we have Silicon Valley that we have to worry about and
Intelligence technocracy, like
intelligence technocracy.
technocratic
Yeah.
in intelligence agencies. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like, well, I guess socially things are going to be a little bit better because we're not going to have the woke stuff. But if anyone was going to put in the digital prison system, it was going to be this group of Teal and JD Vance and
Yeah,
all
the
the Sand
panopticon
Hill Road people.
rising. It is completely.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm not optimistic about that. And I think I think Trump's relationship to Israel and Miriam Adelson, and I think that's gross, and I think it's un-American, whatever that means these days, but incompatible with what the American people want. The American people don't want more wars, and they don't want you giving billions of dollars to Ukraine or to Israel or any of these countries. And unfortunately, I think he's going to accelerate that. I think that his ties to Israel are deeply concerning, and the blank check that they're going to give, at least his picks, his foreign policy picks are disgusting. His
Mhm.
his domestic policy picks are better, but I don't know how much better because
Yeah.
you've got, Christy Nome, who's going to be running DHS, and she's saying, well, we're going to try and we're going to have to make it so that anyone who's criticized, who's anti-Semitic in any way, shape, or form, very vague, very written in pencil, that we can come after you and start to round up those people
That's you,
too. And
Charlie. You know that.
oh, for sure,
That's
yeah,
me
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
God,
My
yeah, yeah.
dog
Oh, I mean,
too.
listen, if we're in the same theme, do you snore? Because
Oh,
we might have
oh,
to
I don't
share.
want to admit this on camera. Are you
Okay,
kidding
I'm just
me?
saying. I mean, if we have to
Listen, my
share,
snore shame is enough for me to lie about it on air. So,
so,
no.
so
Disgusting.
so. I mean, I don't like any of these people. That's my sort of baseline feeling. I'll take the victories where they are, which is that the wokeism component has gone away, and the DEI and all of that that's incompatible with logic and sanity. That going away is a victory for sure. But it gets replaced with these other priorities that I think are maybe even more diabolical, like digital enslavement grid or the 15-minute cities. And he'll say, and of course, with Trump, you always have to be a bit of a linguist. You have to sort of read between the lines. And when he says like, we're not going to give any money to the world, I'm going to cancel our relationship with the World Health Organization. You go, well, that's fantastic. But are you still giving money to Gavi? Well, well, then that's not any better. So you have to sort of understand where he's going and what he wants to do. And of course, now we're starting to talk about, well, what if we just merged with Canada? What if we picked up Greenland at the same time? It's like,
Oh,
I've read Bill Cooper's book. I know what's going on
that
here. I
smells of
mean,
globalism to me. That
yeah, it
smells of
does.
multipolar globalism, boy.
Yep.
It tells you
Yep.
that. Yeah. So okay. Okay. Annexing Canada aside, because that would have like it would be, I don't think it'd be too hard. As long as Elon Musk remains being in control of the main propaganda wing, they get everybody on one platform. The party line happens. Emmanuel Goldstein is up there being taunted on stage. We're all separated. Oh, and the Orwellian nightmare is upon us. What are we doing in the near future? What's going to change now? Apart from the wokeism, which I think I think that was dying a death anyway. What
Yep.
do you
I
think's
hope.
going to happen in like Ukraine? In next, like for instance, did you reckon they're gonna negotiate some sort of peace where Russia keeps what they've already got and that's it?
Well, I don't think Russia's given it up. I mean,
I'm not
either
gonna
they
make them.
negotiate it, that Russia keeps it, or the war continues, and it's just a grind. I think that with regard to Ukraine, because it was such a dirty place for the Democrats. I mean, America in general, but the Democrats in particular had some vested interest in this country, and as people start to look back in history and see what was going on with Biden and Obama and talking about threatening $1 billion and the Burisma deals, and you go, well, if what else is there? And you start to, well, there's some biolabs. Okay, well, what else is there? And well, there's trafficking going on. Ooh, that's not good. Human trafficking is bad. Well, it's more than that. There's organ trafficking. Like, oh my God, this might be the worst country in the world. And who is hell bent on making sure that we continue this war and nobody looks into it? The Democratic Party of the United States. And it was a very specific group that wanted this. And those people were, by all accounts, incompatible with Trump. I mean, I don't know if I would say they're his enemies. I mean, they're his enemies in the sense that it's pro wrestling, so they're scripted enemies. But I think he honestly despises those people. I don't blame him, but I think he really does, and I think that with Ukraine, he's probably going to want to unravel that because it
Yeah.
and of course he's also been very vocal about how much he doesn't like NATO. You know, the rest of the countries aren't pulling their weight. Maybe we should just pull out of this thing, and NATO is a driving force behind this. So I could I could envision the Ukraine situation wrapping up, but which would be fantastic and just a stain on humanity that it happened to it at all. And of course, you know, here in America, I'm sure where you are as well, the narrative behind it was the only word you ever heard was unprovoked Russian invasion, right? And of course, we know it was provoked. We understand the Newlands and what they've done sort of behind the scenes. And this,
30, by 2004, they'd implanted 30,000 Western NGOs in Ukraine alone, and they saw the entirety of the population flip suddenly. Like the propaganda is everywhere. They're all being pushed into it. It's insane what they did.
terrible and terrible for the country of Ukraine. The people, the boys who wound up in the meat grinder. I mean, over a nonsense war.
It's not
It's
the first time this happened to Ukrainians, I
no,
think. It's
no, it's sad, and it's a stain on America for financing that and being involved in it. So I hope that wraps up to the extent that it can. Um, but I think then the resources just then pivot to the Middle East
Mhm.
because there's so much money to be made by
He seems
the
blasé about it. He seems blasé about it. I
Egypt and Jordan. Just take all the Palestinians. Just take them at what like
like Jordan isn't going to end up being swallowed up. That looks like Greater Israel to me.
yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
want that over there too.
Well, you know,
HTS just happened to be taking all of these areas which look like Greater Israel. Isn't that interesting?
and the real estate developers are salivating at the prospect of some new beachfront property there and it's in Gaza and it's the whole thing is gross. And unfortunately Trump is more enthusiastic about being involved in that than he is Ukraine. I'm glad he's not enthusiastic about both of them. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
glad that the Ukraine situation
This
he
devil that
has
we
an
got, yeah.
interest in wrapping that up. Hopefully it
Do you
just
see
because
a
I
setup happening in the Middle East, though? I mean, this whole Syria thing looks like a setup for like I was talking with someone and we were suggesting that we both from what we had gathered from what different people are saying around in the region as well that Iraq will also be taken by like HTS forces and then there'll be this enemy that's surrounding Israel eventually and Israel will need help, etc., 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 and they'll have a reason to then push forward further than just Gaza. So this is a longer term plan. Do you think there's any sort of like that could be a thing?
yeah, I get that feeling as well. I mean, not for nothing, but they've got the Greater Israel patch on the side of their uniforms. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
what
They're
is
sort of
up with these
they're
Israelis?
telegraphing their intentions here to
Yeah.
to grab more land, and I'm
But that land, though, it's very pretty.
yeah, and the 7 countries in 5 year component hasn't been forgotten either, and of course, you know, here in the States, they're always pushing that, you know, Iranian boogeyman. You know, the World War III is just around the corner. You know, it's another invisible enemy, whether it be terrorists or COVID or carbon dioxide or whatever. I mean, it's just a new invisible boogeyman that's definitely going to get you if you don't give up your rights and pay more in taxes to finance all of this. It's but I'll tell you what, I am where I am optimistic is that I think that I don't think I've ever seen a moment where the world kind of in general collectively is against Israel on this in
Yeah.
verbally in a way that I had never heard before. I mean, you know how they operate and they've got control files on a lot of people and a lot of people don't talk about anything. But then you see the United Nations, who I frankly despise, of course, but the, but even their meetings, everyone is voting against Israel except for United States and Israel. Oh no, and they have veto power, right? So they just nothing gets done. But the tone and the feeling around in Europe, and I guess it's always been that way in the Middle East, but in America, we're starting to have conversations that were never allowed. And of course, right on schedule.
Loads of them. I know. I've seen them on X. Lots of conversations about people going, "Well, it's Hitler. He wasn't all bad." Like, yeah,
Why aren't there
yeah.
translations? I mean, how come we can't get any of these
Oh
speeches this
man.
former painter made translated into
People
English?
swing, don't they? They swing from side to side, multi-generationally, like, a couple of generations down the line, and they're all back swinging on the other side again, and they're just like, and it all gets co-opted, it all gets distorted, even like, I listened to one of have you heard any of these AI Hitler speeches where it's Hitler speaking and he's speaking in like a British accent with in
No,
English?
no.
It's the speech redone, generated with AI, and it's very clever. And it's because you listen to it and you're like, "Oh right, oh that's what he's saying." Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
quite normal. Actually, they're pissed off because their lives have changed for the worse because there's been certain people within the society who have been doing bad things to them, and that's been getting them angry for a long time, and they want it to stop. That's something that we hear all around the place, especially now, currently, what's going on in the USA. Going on to, how do you think this whole border thing's gonna continue then? I'm going to treat you as someone who knows a little bit about everything and a lot about some
Yeah,
things, because that's what I think
oh, that's
is.
fair. Yeah, the border situation has been. Um, I was talking to Dan Lyman from Border Hawk News, and I met him at this event, and he was saying that he used to be based in Switzerland. Now he's sort of head of InfoWars Europe, and he said, we had guys in Switzerland. This was a couple years ago. Our reporters were out talking to people. He said they were wound up in, I think, I want to say Croatia. They were talking to the police there, and they're saying, "What are you noticing about all these people that you're picking up?" And he said, "Well, what we're noticing is that they all have the same debit cards. They're all getting these debit cards, and we found
Mohammed
out who
Mohammed.
they're yeah they're getting all these debit cards from." And they said, "Well, who's financing them?" I said, "Well, Open Society Foundation, of course, Soros is initially financing them." But he said the thing that we weren't expecting, he said, "Well, that was no surprise to us. We knew that was probably the case." But he said what we found that was really alarming was that they're reloadable cards, and Open Society was initially putting the money on there, but then when it came to the reloading, that was being done by the EU, and it was the EU
Sneaky
themselves
deaky.
we're
Yeah.
we're 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 paying this. And so you go, well, oh, okay, hang on a second. So this is very problem reaction solution. We create this problem of all these migrants, and then we fund them and create, the pipeline. And so he and I are talking about Europe, but it's no different on the southern border as well. You've got a collection of countries, and first and foremost, I understand why people would want to leave their country. Let's say you were in El Salvador and it was really dangerous there, and MS-13 was creating problems, and you had a reason to want to leave. Or you're in a country that America is destabilizing financially or politically and creating chaos in there, and you want to leave. I understand that the root cause of the problem is the American empire, creating these scenarios that people are wanting to leave their home country and go somewhere else. I mean, if you're worried about getting bombed in some Central American country, if you go to America, you're not going to get bombed. It's America who's doing the bombing. so
Mhm.
so you're kind of safer there, like the closer you get to them. So first and foremost, I understand why people would want to do that. But then you look at, and everyone, people have wanted to do that my entire life. That's nothing new. The coordination was what really jumped out. It's like everybody decided to walk 4,000 miles all at the same
Mhm.
time, and everybody's going the same way, and everybody's getting food, and everybody's getting,
Seems a little
tents.
to me. Yeah.
It's very organized. It's being made to happen. Why is it being made to happen? And then you start to go, well, let's look at who's inside the Biden administration. And what we all sort of recognized immediately was it was filled with trilateral commission members. I mean, people they have to put their membership on ice when they rotate into the administrations, but Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken and Susan Rice and all these people, and the 17 members of the Trilateral Commission were in Biden's administration. And we're like, well, what do they want? They want open borders, and
They don't want anything. Don't look at them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Don't dig into what the Trilateral Commission wants. Their fantasy of regionalized, cliques like the EU or the North American Union and all these things, and then you catch AMLO giving a press conference and he's saying, "Oh yeah, I was just having Anthony Blinken was just down here. We were talking. I was just talking to him about a shared constitution." You're like, "Wait, what? What are you talking? You're talking to
God.
Secretary of State about a shared constitution with Mexico? Why isn't Blinken in handcuffs for that?
Yeah.
So you start to realize that there's an organic side to it for sure. There's a lot of people that are seeking a better life in the United States, and whether they're going to get a better life or not, that's debatable. But
most of it is globalism.
yeah. Yeah.
Most of it is globalists.
And so you understand why people would want to do it, but then you say, but you guys are facilitating it. You're making it happen. You're not only allowing it to happen, you're accelerating it. You're intent. When they're showing footage here of these border crossing gates at the southern or some place in maybe the Texas Mexico border, and they're like, these gates used to be shut. They're like, they're not shut anymore. They're open. Oh, okay, we'll close them. We can't close them. They're welded open. What? And so the gates were welded
That's not
open.
a gate, mate. It's just a wall. It's just an addition to a wall. If it's welded open, it's no longer a gate. A gate must function to be a gate. That's what I say.
There's no gate anymore.
Yeah.
So you see that and you go, okay, this is being made to happen. And then there's the human side of it too, where once these people come across, and again, you always have to remember that it's like these are people. Some of them are mentally ill, some of them are deranged. Venezuela drained their prison. Brilliant on their part, by the way. When your sworn enemy America is trying to destroy your government, and you realize their border's wide open. Why don't we take everyone from our insane asylums? Why don't we take everybody from our prisons? Why don't we send them on the first plane to Tijuana, put them right there as close to the border as we can, give them some money, and say, "Go have fun in America. You go do what you're going to do on the inside."
Take your Soros card. Don't worry. There's American NGOs will be paying on top of it as well to engineer a crisis, and the UN, of course, will be heavily involved. I mean, I released an article, a short one, probably in October, that was about Eric Weinstein and how he wrote the Migration for the Benefit of All for the UN between 2000 and 2002, and now they'll all pretend later on that there's something else, but these guys, they sell out like the laws, the policy, the ground, everything, right from under us, under our very noses.
And with Eric Weinstein, it's an interesting connection too, because his relation to Jeffrey Epstein and what Epstein was working on with Martin Nowak at Harvard, this evolutionary dynamics and evolutionary game theory and population and migrations and things like that, and building these computer models to if this happens, then what happens to the population? And you go, why are you working evolutionary game theory? Like, what is this? You're trying to figure out, how do we engineer a crisis? If we insert all of these people in, what is that, this input, what does it do to the computer models? How does that, it's all theoretical, right? When Martin and Jeffrey are talking about it at Harvard after he's given them $30 million to cook all this stuff up, it makes a whole lot more sense now in retrospect when you go, maybe they were talking about the border. Maybe they were talking about, maybe with Eric Weinstein, the reason why he's talking about population and whatnot is that that's what these guys have been working on for a while, trying to figure out, how do you subvert a country without firing a shot. You can insert all of the worst people in, and how do you do that? And what does it do to the culture? And what does it do to the government? And it's got a little Clower and Piven component to it too. Like, let's overload the welfare system and break it so that then we can rebuild it in our global communistic sort of fashion. And
Let's create it, and then let's also, by the time it comes around to being actioned, become the antithesis of it, because there will be no one who will best be able to move within that sort of conversation and debate than the person who created the problem in the first place. And I think that's what we see a lot of at the moment as well. It's like those I mean, Eric Weinstein, I think I really see how he uses his language. I really see how he does certain things in a very clever way to make people think he's much more intelligent than he is. But at the end of the day, he is doing the right thing for himself. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's doing it very well. He's playing off both sides, and it's very clever. It's very clever. I still got to have a bit of respect for one of these players of these games, because some of them are doing a really good job. And yeah, he was involved in Edge, and Edge is really fascinating. You look back at the programs of Edge, and you've got like it makes more sense as we understand the technology and how it's going to work around us, and how we're going to be gripped by it. And then who is involved in Edge makes a lot more sense as well, because you start to see the ones who they were already. It's all young global leaders, really. Young global leaders in tech, young global leaders in politics, young global leaders in whatever. This is all young global leaders nonsense to that extent. So what do you think? Do you think this? What can Trump actually do to sort out the border crisis? What is he just gonna deport a load of people? Is that really what it is?
well, first and foremost, I think he's going to, give the impression that he's going to deport as many people as he can. Now, if people choose to self-deport, or if it just creates chaos and havoc and makes people feel very uncomfortable, I could see a scenario where he does a little of both. I mean, early on, you're dragging the cameras with you when you do these ice raids. It's sending Tom Holman out in the field with these people. You're sending Christy Noem out in the field with these people. It's mostly a photo op, but it's by design, right? To get on camera the idea that these raids are coming, and that there's a new sheriff in town. I get very uncomfortable
Crazy sheriff.
when I hear governments talking about moving large groups of people from one place to another, because it's often, whether it's resettling them in the East, as they said in World War II, or, anytime you're moving large groups of people, a lot of them go missing, a lot of them get killed. It's sometimes it's sort of like a euphemism for genocide too, as well. I'm not saying that the southern border necessarily is going to devolve into that, but it could. And I get very uncomfortable when the state is involved in relocating people. And
I
Trump
talked to a
is,
few people who were involved in looking at people trafficking across the board, and it's something like in 2024, I think it was like, or and to 2023, it was like something like 80,000 kids just went missing. That's crazy. They went go to houses where there's no one living there, and there's like 10, 20 different refugees registered as refugees, migrants. I mean, this is the thing, is that I can see why. Listen, we are all immigrants to some extent. We really are all immigrants to some extent, but it happens over a very long time. It doesn't happen over just one generation like is happening now. And the push to change our societies is insane. And what it allows is then for to feed to the fire of abuse that is on the top echelons. Because there is no doubt that what's going on behind the scenes is a lot of these people who are going missing are somewhere where we don't even know exists. There's places we haven't even got a clue about a lot of what's going on. We think we have a clue about what's going on in the world. We get a sniff of something, we're like, that, look, there's something else going on, but there's actually a lot more happening than we can even like imagine. What comes next then? what do you see? What do you see in this Trump administration? What's your big takeaways? Do you think that RFK is going to get through the nomination process and stuff?
I don't know. I mean, it'd be good. Somebody needs to go fight against big pharma. Unfortunately, what I think is really going to happen with regard to the border is that, again, as we recognize these problem reaction solution strategies that work very well, the problem is we've got all these 12 million illegals that have just come into the United States. Reaction. You're the new president. Round them all up, get them out of here, right? Solution. Well, we can do that, but in order to make sure that they don't come back, we're going to need to sort of tag them. And that is biometrics, and that is where I get real concerned, because
Mm.
it feels like the entry into this is, well, we're going to scan their eyeballs and get their fingerprints and scan their buttholes or whatever they have to do. Document these people,
Wow, I
put
didn't
a
even
name
know that
on
was
them.
a thing. I did not know that people were going to get their butthole scanned.
Well, and it's Trump's America, baby.
Is my
Anything's
butthole
possible.
individual? Do you know?
I don't know, like a
Is there another
fingerprint. It could
butthole
be.
like it?
I don't know, but maybe like
Right. Okay. Wait.
combined
Wait.
with the
Wait. Wait. Let's
picture
let
and
get off
everything.
track thinking about me
It
butthole. Let's
paints paints a picture, and of course it will, the biometric component to it will happen to,
buttermetric.
yeah,
Sorry.
to thunderous applause, right, as they
Yeah.
would say in the Star Wars movie. How does
Mhm.
democracy die? And of course it'll start with the illegals right there, but then it'll eventually be, well, anybody who's flying into a United States airport has to have this in order to get through it. And you're not doing anything wrong, right? If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about, as they say. And so you can see it getting normalized in the sense that first it starts with the illegal people, getting them into the database and saying, it's for your protection. And then it just becomes, well, we've got this database and it's great. And Larry Ellison has been wanting to do this since 9/11, and he's of course running this with Sam Altman, and they're talking about really kind of universal basic income and how it all works. And so you can see the push for digital IDs. You can see the push for scanning your face when you go through the TSA here in the United States. It's optional right now. At some point, it will not be optional. When you go through, they swipe your card, they look at it, and they say, now look in that camera right there, and you look in, they take a picture. There's a sign beneath it that says, this is optional. And so when they ask me every time I fly, I say, no, thank you, I'm good. But they'll get me eventually.
Yeah.
They'll get whatever they need at some point, and then feed that into a system under the guise of making sure that we don't allow these rapists and murderers back into our country again. It's and I fear that. Just I fear it in general, but I also fear the people who are implementing it. Larry Ellison and Sam Altman and Elon Musk and Joe Lonsdale and all these people. These are the worst technocrats around. And
They're
some,
making the World Economic Forum's dystopian world of tomorrow. I mean, you look at the World Economic Forum training slides, and exactly everything they're creating is what it looks like. So they're all on the same page. Everybody there's a fair few pages, but they're all the same.
yeah,
Most definitely.
Altman. Uh, I think Sam Altman is the United States version of Ferrari. Right? He's
Mm.
the uh, gay Zionist without a stake in the world, no kids in the world, never going to have them, wants to control people. There's no soul. You have no soul. You have no universal basic income. Sure, we'll give you that through our world coin, but we need to scan your eyeballs first, and we'll do that. We'll give you $50 worth of this world coin, shit coin, essentially, for doing that. And that is a slippery slope
Hmm.
towards the digital prison. And so, like, on the one hand, you asked, we kind of started with this, is like the Kamala Harris regime, at least they were incompetent. You know what I mean? Like, there was something you almost kind of think, well, I might take the DEI stuff and all the wokeism, and as long as I have an incompetent sort of, I don't know, whatever Kamala is an empty suit. But the problem with the Trump group is that they're very good at their job. Those technocrats are
Yeah,
extremely
yeah,
efficient. They know what they're doing. They have endless amounts of money, as if the $500 billion that Trump promised them wasn't enough. They can just go to Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, and all the venture capital firms are there, and they can get financed for whatever they want. Not to mention they have their own money from taking their companies public and making billions of dollars. So it's a dangerous group that has motive and opportunity and the resources to make their dystopian dreams come true. And of course, they have the backing of the president of the United States, who sees this as a good thing. And so that to me is the most concerning thing. I'd love for RFK to come in and take on the pharmaceutical industry and dismantle FDA and the CDC, and and do all that. And I hope that happens, because that's a real measurable thing where you can say, well, he understands that the vaccines are dangerous. And I know he sort of contradicts himself when he gets up there on these panels and talks about it. I don't know how much of that is him just trying to tell them what they want to hear so he'll get confirmed, and then it's going to switch once he gets in there. But I mean, if you're willing to lie to them on then you're willing to lie to us. So I don't trust any of these people, I think, is my point. But at least we're starting to have conversations about medical freedom and the the health of the country and the so-called benefits of these injections. And I get very concerned about the blending of this. So the health side with RFK, the tech side with all these billionaire guys, and putting that together for what Larry Ellison talked about, artificial intelligence mRNA cancer vaccines that
oh,
are
yeah.
specific to the person and ready in 48 hours. I
Stage
mean,
one
I
is
get some
done. Stage two must commence.
I get the welcome trust sort of vibe. Like, we want a vaccine in 100 days or less. And you go, oh, I like, slow
We want to
down,
test on
take your
human
time.
beings. That's
Like,
basically it.
we don't need it in 100 days. Why don't you guys? It's not a race, you
No,
can
it
take your
is
time.
though.
But no, there's something else going on here. They
Yeah,
want to inject you with something, and it's not for your health, it's for your safety.
yeah,
And
yeah, most
that's
definitely. I mean, what? This is so amazing. There's going to be another election in 4 years' time. It's just gonna roll on. Are the Democrats gonna be have time to reform? And because they were all looking really old in the tough this time round. I can't believe that the party won't sit down and say, okay, we need a new wave to come in. And I don't think that the woke culture will stay in. I think they're gonna have to get pragmatic if they want to get power. So what do you see coming? Do you see that who takes over the Republican Party post Trump? What are we looking at? And one question in particular, I think maybe you should take first is if on a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being very, very likely, how likely do you think JD Vance is going to end up being president?
I think there's a 50-50 chance. The
I'm on 71.
there's there was an old I remember listening to Howard Stern had Jesse Ventura in one time,
Probably.
and he said, and he's like, Howard, I'm going to run for president, and I want you to be my vice president. And
Oh,
and
your
he's like,
Jesse
why would I
Ventura
want to be your
impression
vice?
turns me on. Go on. Keep going.
I'm from the Baja,
Oh, yeah.
he talks and Howard goes, why would you want me to be the vice president? He goes, well, that way I would be assured that nobody would murder me, And so you almost have to have a shitty vice president to ensure that you don't get whacked. JD Vance seems like a reasonable guy, actually. I mean, I know
Mm.
he's got ties to Teal.
Teal ties.
He's
He's on a crucifix, a teal crucifix.
he's he's
Yeah.
he's extremely tied. So he I can I can I can envision a scenario in which a calculation is made that Trump needs to go so that we can get Vance in there. You know,
I think that
um,
was, personally, I felt that was going to be the plan all along. Like, I really did. I think it's been kind of semi-signaled as well. I think personally that 2 years down the line, we're going to see something happen. Maybe not even that long. Because look at, I mean, they already were taking pot shots at him back at the election year, which is just insane. I can't believe that more people aren't talking about that and what comes next, what comes after that. But okay, that was the first. So yeah,
if H.W. Bush was still alive, he didn't even wait. He waited what, like a month before he tried to have Reagan whacked.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Oh, that
uh,
was dirty, wasn't it? I mean, he's just desperate for
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. But
I
George H.W. Bush back then was one of the, I mean, I've done a lot of research from during that period, watched a load of videos from Watergate up to about 1982 for the searching for Stanley stuff and for looking into Stanley Pottinger. And he is one of the most grotesque people. You can feel him sliming inside you while he's talking. He's just
yeah,
horrible. And he is just intelligence personified, but not intelligence, you know.
right. I've described George H.W. Bush as the worst person in the 20th century, in
Yeah,
my
yeah,
opinion.
yeah. I
I
oh
think he's
God, you got it, you got it. I mean, makes me feel ill, sick
Yeah,
inside.
yeah. Um, and what's funny is that the narrative around him here in the States when he was running for president in '88 was that he was the wimp.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of wimpy. We don't really like him.
Mm.
He's kind of wimpy. And then he went on the big thing. I don't want to eat broccoli or Brussels sprouts or whatever it was. He was all been out of shape about that. And they're like, oh, he's just like us, he's got, and it's like, no, he's first of all, I bet he loved the idea that the general public thought he was a wimp. He was
Mhm.
most definitely one of the most diabolical operators around, and
Yeah,
talk
all the
in terms of
broccoli.
like his connections to Rockefellers and his
Mhm.
grandfather's connection. I mean, just um, a disgusting human being. And he wanted to take out Reagan immediately. I think that if you're Donald Trump, I'm not trying to give the guy any advice or not that he'd take it, but I'd be very careful about your Secret Service.
Mhm.
I mean, I think they set him up on a couple of these things, and there's the guys, at least the guy in Florida and the guys at the cyber truck and the guy driving around in New Orleans are all have Fort Bragg ties, so there's some the calls are coming from inside the house on this one. This isn't
Yeah.
some unhinged random lunatic who's just out on a golf course. It's a guy who's got a lot of fingerprints of intelligence all over him and ties to the military and been in battle zones and things like that. I think if you're Donald Trump, you need to be very careful about your movements and telegraphing that and where you go and who you talk to. And I think that in his second term, he could definitely wind up unalived by these people. And of course, then JD Vance. And so what does that look like? Well, that looks like a direct connection into technocracy.
He looks a little like the devil would. I just every time I look at him, it's like these eyes that kind of like, oh, we should have known he was Satan beforehand. Ah, we missed that one. That's
He's
how I
a
feel about him.
he's a blue-eyed devil. Yeah, they've been calling
Mm,
calling us that for a long time, calling me that for a while. Yeah,
yeah,
white
I've,
devil.
oh, you white devil. Are we going to speak in South African accents and call each other white devils? I think we could. Um, I find it really, yeah, we're in a really fascinating time. I'm just wondering what, like, what politics even looks like in the near future.
I don't know.
These party systems, then they've obviously merged into the center, and everyone's flipping around. And is it not no longer like Democrat? All the Republicans are made up of Democrats nowadays, so that suggests that in a few years, all the Democrats will be Republicans. So, I mean.
That's how it works, right? It's that whipsaw effect where you go so far to one side that then it naturally sort of flips you back to the other. Everyone gets fed up with it. I remember thinking that when I was younger, I remember thinking that the Democrats were like the compassionate party and that the Republicans were these like mean, sort of like not they're interested in making money and power and control, and they're not really worried about the little guy, and they're stepping on him. And the Democrats were like, hang on a second, let's be fair, and let's, God, I mean, how delusional was I? But that's the sales pitch that you get. But the
Yeah, we all
left
sub it
went
up.
so far left that by contrast, you could have never moved at all. But by contrast, you appear to be on the right just simply because they've gone so far in one direction that anybody who's saying, "Well, I have an idea. You know, why don't we not uh, create? Why don't we not invade certain? I mean, I used to think the Democrats were against wars and things like that, and there was always only the Republicans. And boy, I
Sneaky
mean, it's flipped
bastards.
so much. It feels like a big puppet show. But the Democratic Party right now is an embarrassment to themselves. I mean, but what do you expect when you have the likes of like a Debbie Wasserman Schultz involved in it, and the people that you put up there as like the thought leaders are people like AOC and Cory Booker and uh, you know Jamal, what's his name, the guy who Jamal Bowman, the guy who pulled the fire alarm and then it went to the AOC rally and got all crazy and was screaming at the crowd, trying to get them all whipped up. You watch that and you go, like, I'm embarrassed on your behalf because clearly you can't be embarrassed for yourself. Like, look at this. You guys are clowns, and this is and and I think that like from the general public standpoint, it's when it's all politics and it's Washington D.C. and they're fighting with each other, it all feels very staged and kind of fake. But where the reality is if you live in one of these cities like Los Angeles, which I lived for 25 years, Los Angeles or San Francisco or Portland or Seattle or Chicago or New York or Philadelphia or Denver, where I am now, it's not theoretical. It's practical. You can see it with your own eyes. You can see the destruction. You can see the tent cities. You can see the people mulling around out in the streets. You can see the rampant lawlessness and the crime happening. San Francisco has closed up all the retail is left. The companies are leaving. People are leaving California. That is real. So I think that they've got a huge problem. The Democratic side has a huge problem in selling their vision for America when the current state of the cities that they control is marked by chaos. Just open your eyeballs, look out the window. Like Bill Hicks used to say, I open my windows, I look out there, it's crickets. Well, if you look out the window in San Francisco, it's it's Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah,
And so you
really
can't
does look like it,
deny
doesn't it?
reality for that long. And businesses recognize this. They pack up, they leave California for tax purposes. They leave it because there's no affordable housing. They leave it because their CEO is getting mugged or stabbed or whatever. There's just plenty of reasons to not be in that. And so until they clean, and of course that's you know, Soros installing these people, being involved in financing the campaigns of Karen Bass and George Gascon and the guys in Larry Krasner in Philadelphia and Eric Adams and Chesa Bowden and you name it. They're all taking money from the same person who's got a track record of being a subverter who destroys countries and pulls color revolutions, and that's what's happening here in the United States. It's the problem is that we're so deluded into thinking that only happens elsewhere, that would never happen. That happens in Georgia or Azerbaijan or wherever, you name it. It doesn't happen here, or Ukraine, though maybe there's a color revolution there or someplace, but not in America. Well, there was a color revolution, and I think it started, it really came into power in 2020 with the Black Lives Matter. So his color revolution was the Black Revolution in America, and he's destroyed with the help of these elected officials. He's destroyed these cities and maybe even in some cases states. So until that gets fixed, Democrats are going to have a hard time selling their vision for the future
It
because
works in their favor, though, because of fifth generation warfare. I mean, really, all of these guys, they need to create the sort of manifestation of problems they're not accountable for. The last guys are accountable for them. And so this is why I think this sort of like temporary, it very feel like a temporary shift over to another Trump administration. Lots of things will happen, and then there'll be a flip back to something else, and it just keeps people disorientated and not knowing what's going to happen next, just constant flipping. So I think this is convenient for what they're doing.
yeah, in the sports world, we get that a lot too, where you're like, this coach isn't working out, man. We got to change the coach. It's like, well, you could change the coaches all day long, but there's a culture problem inside your organization. The ownership structures. You got a
Oh,
crazy
shit,
owner
you're
who
talking about Manchester United, aren't you?
I'm not talking about Manchester United, but I mean I could be.
Yeah,
But
definitely are.
but you see how they go. Well. Once we get a new coach in, then things will be different.
Mm.
Well, maybe not. But if the players are the same, the ownership is the same, the coach changes, but how much control does he have? And that's kind of how we've got it here. Yeah, you could run on a campaign if you're a Democrat in California. You can run in a couple years on a campaign of I'm not Gavin Newsom,
Mhm, mhm,
and that would be a yes, I'm a Democrat, but I don't believe in these things. I'm not Gavin Newsom. Put me in, and then that guy gets in, and then it's a different flavor of tyranny. Maybe it's not the wokeism, or maybe it's not the destroyed cities, but it's maybe he sells off all your farmland to Chinese or something. Who knows? But they're in order to get you begging, they make things so bad that you beg for a new guy to come in and fix the problems, only to be disappointed that the new guy has a different agenda and that things are only going to get worse, and then they
What,
think
like
they're going to
Mark
vote their way
Carney
out
in
of it.
Canada? Like you get
You're
rid
going to
of
give me
Trudeau, and then you're suddenly rising to the peak would be Mark Carney, one of the worst people
Oh,
in the world.
great. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. No, and that's kind of the Kamala Harris thing too. It's like, do we want a woke retard who nobody respects, who probably can't get anything done, or do you want a diabolical person like Mark Carney who
Mm.
definitely knows how to work the
You
system,
know
has
they
been
want that.
I know they want that. You know they want that. The general
Man.
public in Canada, um, but the
Collectively
problem
as
is,
subs, is that what we're saying? Collectively, they need a big diabolical dom to be on top of them.
yeah, you go through Trudeau, you're begging for anybody, just
Mm-mm.
anybody other than this guy, right? Well, we've got a guy who knows how to get things done. He's done great things at the World Bank or the Bank of England or wherever. Like, well, let's bring in Mark Carney. He knows
Yeah,
his way
this
around. You go,
really
oh well.
interesting. I'll give you a little sneak peek. Me and Dan Fournier are doing an article on Mark Carney at the moment.
Hmm.
Really, really, really interesting. Really, really sneaky. I found some very interesting things. One of the things I found interesting is looking into his time at Goldman Sachs. And when he's in about 98, I think it is, you've got like the Moscow bank is about to collapse. The Moscow currency, I think it's 98. The Moscow currency is going to go, it's like October 17th or something. It's got a very famous day that it happened. And the Russian, like the whole economy collapsed. And Soros lost 2 billion in that 1 year in Russia. And Carney was sent in by Goldman Sachs about a month and a half before the collapse, and a load of other Goldman Sachs representatives, and they went and they wined and dined the Russians and slowly eked all of their money out of Russia before the collapse happened. And then the collapse happened, and it was like they were like, oh well, we barely got a touch. The nation got out of it really easily. And that was Mark Carney going in there and slowly creeping everything back. But when you actually look back on it, it doesn't. It's almost like a spy. There's not a mention of him in any newspaper at the time, not a mention of all of the negotiations happening, nothing. It's all backroom deals. And afterwards, he makes his name as, oh, yes, he saved Goldman Sachs loads of money on this. But when you look at what actually happened, it was almost like James Bond. They went in and they flew across someone famous. I can't remember who it was. They flew across even to sort of like dazzle these it was one of the politicians. It was George H.W. Bush. I think they got George H.W. Bush to come across, and it was like dazzling. Spent loads of money on everything just to eke their money out. It was very clever.
Mm.
But Mark Carney is one of those. I feel like he's a spy. I feel like these are a kind of like financial mafioso spy like characters who are now perfect for the technocratic financial era, the change as everything's going to flip. And do you think that this is what we're looking at, CBDCs and the like being implemented by the World Economic Forum faithful?
Yeah, like the I mean, what did Goldman Sachs do to Greece a few years ago, right? Just loaded them up with debt and just collapsed them, from the inside. And I worry about, I think bankers are the most dangerous people on the planet. I think they can do more to destroy a country than than the military can. They just hollow them out from the inside. I have big concerns about the BIS and their universal ledger, the rail system for all of this, and I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out with a CBDC, or if it's going to actually wind up being the stable coins that get programmable. But the idea that you have programmable money
Mhm.
is like a fantasy that these guys could only dream of at some point. Like if only the dollar bills or the pound notes in your pocket could feed us back your exact location or what you spent it on. But there's a big blind spot for them when it's cash, and you can't really keep track of it. And they would love to know, and they would love to know for tax purposes, and they would love to know for just you know gathering data on people, or manipulating people, or you know knowing what everybody's doing. But they could never do that until now. And with money that's programmable or set to, you could, here in the States, let's say, hey, the numbers came out for Christmas shopping season, and boy, are they bad. They're down about 17% across the board, let's just say. Is it a fake? I'm just making this up. But in order to really kind of get a handle on this, we're going to need to kind of goose the spending a bit more. And so what we've decided is that 25% of the CBDCs that you have in your wallet are going to expire in the next 90 days. We've set it. So get to spending, or else they're going to be worthless. And
Oh yeah,
you could
party
maybe,
time. I said party time. Yeah, digital party time.
yeah, get them to do that. Get them to or we they talk about the 15-minute cities, and I think in some people's minds it's like, what, 15 minutes, what are they going to build a wall around the city? No, they don't really have to. What if they know who you are because you've got your digital wallet, and it's required, it's tied to you, and they know where you live? What if they geotag it? What if you get a 15-minute radius around it and your money just doesn't work 20 minutes
Mhm.
outside, right? What if outside of the radius, and maybe it's not 15 minutes necessarily, but maybe it's just geographical. What if it's just in your state, or just in your little city, or whatever?
Yeah, but
But
climate change though.
under the guise of, of course, the climate change will be factored into this in some way, shape, or form. But if you've got money that they can set to expire, or not work outside of a geographical area, or not work to buy gold or silver or guns or bullets or red meat or whatever, toilet paper, or you have to shop on the company store, and it's all the big companies that are tied to the WEF, or and you can't go to the local hardware store anymore because they can't accept your money because they're not part of the system. They didn't sign up to be part of the system, and so now you're black market. Just to go down the street to buy a hammer, you got to give the guy, you know what I mean? So this is, in my opinion, the hill to die on. Programmable money is is the end of sovereignty and the end of freedom and the end of privacy and all these things. And I just recorded an episode that'll be out talking about Trump's Brave New World because I was getting real Brave New World vibes from this whole thing. That the people that he's put in charge of this, the Sam Altmans and the Larry Ellisons of the world, this is a sort of dystopian hellscape, that technocrat run hellscape that they fantasize about, and it's always been a fantasy. You write Brave New World 1932, it's like, well, I don't know what it's going to look like 100 years from now. Well, maybe they got some good information from their committee of 300 co-members that said, well,
Mhm.
look, write the future that we want, write it out. It'll be, we'll guise it under uh, fantasy, right? Fiction, not real, just an idea of this brave new world. But is it really fictional, or is this the direction that they want us to go? And I think the bankers are going to play a huge role in this
Mhm.
with their money, because that's one of the ways that they can really control your behavior and get you on board. I mean, hey, if you don't want to sign up for the jab, we just turn your money off.
Mhm.
That's it. Or, or so, or, you
Past
can never
Johnny would have
save.
would have said, all right then. Like, but once upon a time, I would have been like, that would have been so easy to like pressurize me and for me to just go, all right, I got nothing better. There was points in my life where I was so skint, I didn't have anything at all, and I didn't have food in the fridge, and hungry, and thinking, well, I would even do experimental trials for money right now. I wonder how much those experimental trials are. But now Johnny is just far away from that. It's gotta
But
be resisted, but I'm not sure how easy it is to encourage people to resist, because I think lots of people exactly like I was once
yeah,
upon a time.
for sure. I empathize with them too, because they're going to get pushed into a situation. I mean, we already saw it with the COVID stuff going on here, where it was, take the jab or lose your job. And it's like, if you're forced to make that calculation, you're like, I don't want to do this, but I also don't want to, I've got a family, and I got to do what I got to do to feed them,
Hmm.
they're putting me in a bad situation. People were forced to compromise their own values out of practicality, because they had to keep that going.
Mm.
So it's a horrible place to be. I think it does a lot to your soul as well. If you compromise on something like that, then you're sort of in, and it's like, well, now I'm in. Like, now I'm part of the Borg. I'm part of,
Mhm.
like, I've agreed to take the shot. Well, I mean, if they can do
Oh
it once, they can
man.
do it again. And I would suggest that, given what we've gone through over the last 4 years, the second time around, they won't make some of the same mistakes. I mean, they felt
Hmm.
like the messaging around the shots was very wonky and nonsensical. I mean, they were offering you, like, first they were saying it's, the right thing to do, and then they were saying it's you got to do it for your job, and then they were saying, well, we'll give you lottery tickets, or Bill de Blasio showing eating a cheeseburger. Don't you want one of these cheeseburgers? It's like, well, this is
Some of this
bull.
was nudging and behavioral insights all the way. I know
Yeah.
the behavioral insight team in the UK were like, you should use disgust. You should use disgust. You should show people who aren't going to get vaccinated that you're disgusted with them, and that's the best way. And they don't. I mean, when they're saying that out loud, are they thinking about what that actually means within society? No, they're soulless little. They're basically bots. Loads of humans are bots nowadays. They accept that they don't know better, so they're just going to listen to whoever's next to them, who might be just confident enough to say that they know better, and they don't know any better. And all down the line, it's just people who will act like bots, and it's a terrifying process we've gone through. When you talk about COVID and that time, I think I have loads of different flashbacks to loads of different points where I'm standing in a public place, watching people act in a certain way, and realizing, the same thing that I started researching during that time, which was behavioral insights, psychological behavioral sort of nudging, and all of that sort of stuff was just in action all around us, and we do it naturally. We naturally try and make sure that everything is organized and orderly. So it's times like that where it gets more organized each time, and it gets shorter amount of time between them. So
Yeah.
hey, a lot of people say, "Oh, they injected a load of us, and all of those people are going to die eventually." And it's just not that simple. Slowly over time, they get you so used to it that you don't even notice it happening around you. And that's the majority of people who live on this earth with us. A load of people who are being murdered slowly, and if you say to them, they'll be like, "Oh, we got different points of view, haven't we, mate? We got different
Yeah.
points of view."
Yeah. I mean, when we watched here, you almost had to applaud the audacity of their plan, where they were saying, well, you got to go this direction down the grocery store aisles, and there would be tape on the floor, right? And you go that direction, and then the other direction down the next aisle, and then you've got to stand on the dot. My favorite was in the airports. They would put tape across like every other chair in the lobby waiting to get on the plane. And you couldn't sit in this chair, but you could sit in the one next to it, right? And then because you can't be next to somebody. And then they would queue you up and put you on a plane where you were 4 inches away from the guy on your right and the guy on your left, and 6 inches in front of the guy in front of you and the person behind you. And you're like, this is all theater. This is all
Mhm.
nonsense. Like I I got into it with stewardesses, and they were giving me a hard time because I was taking my mask off. I wouldn't keep it on, and I had one person to threaten to, we're going to land this plane and throw you in jail and everything. What are you talking? So I just would put my hood over, and I, put my put a blanket over my head and pretend like I was sleeping. And in there, I wouldn't have my mask on. I'd just be, reading on my phone or listening
Mhm.
to music or whatever. But the fact that there were so many people that voluntarily went down one direction down the aisle, and then the other, not everybody, of course, but the overwhelming majority
In
did.
Chile, it was bloody everybody. I tell you, even the
Oh
babies knew
yeah.
what to do. And when I was listening to you there, I was thinking, yeah, in India though, you got whipped with bamboo around the back of the legs. So you did. You're like, all right, I walked down the aisle. I walked down the
Yeah.
aisle. That's
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
it. So this
Yeah.
is.
And but you would think that the light bulb would go off for
Mhm.
some people and go, is this really about a virus?
Mhm.
Because it doesn't feel that way. It feels like it's not about science, it's
It's
about
about
compliance. It's about,
it's about social order, and there was something make people salivate during that time. There was one experience I have that when I was thinking of when you were talking about there, and it was on a plane. Me and Whitney were coming back from we were going from Chile to Mexico to Britain, so we didn't have to go for a quarantine hotel when we
oh
got
right,
back to
yeah.
Britain. So we had 2 weeks in Mexico, and we're leaving Mexico. We're on the plane, and three people got kicked off the plane for non-compliance.
Whoa.
One for not having willing to wear his mask. He had it down under his chin, but it wasn't enough for them. It wasn't enough for them. And another two because they got restless waiting for this trip to start. So they started having a playing around with each other, and then were silly and they were mates. And one of them spat at the other, but it wasn't in a nasty way. It was like silly, playful, drunk people. And
Mhm.
one got kicked off, and then the other got kicked off. But there was this whole thing where they were watching. The people on the plane were watching, and when the last two people who were getting kicked off, it was so unfair. The first person, okay, it was fine. The last two people, it just seemed like it was just two silly kids who were playing like young girls who were playing the game, and that they were just at this point just desperately enforcing policy so strictly because it was COVID, and they escorted them off the plane, and then there was this like standing ovation on the plane. All of the people on the plane were clapping at this, like, oh, and I looked around at one guy who was clapping, and he looked like, yeah, he was nodding, and he caught eye contact with me, and I started going like this, and he slowly stopped clapping until he realized, oh, wait a minute, I'm in there,
Yeah.
and he felt ashamed, and I think it was just, oh man, when we're in a group and we're on the winning side, everything's cool, man. Everything's cool.
Yeah.
And it was so easy for people to jump on what would be the winning side there because the winning side was all powerful and
Yeah.
the majority. So kind of
It
don't
taught
blame
me
them.
a lot about human behavior, conditioning, and obedience, and how people are are weak. At points they're very weak about things. There's no, I had no respect for those people because they hadn't done any of the research or any of the work. They hadn't questioned anything. It's like you're so sure of yourself because you watched the television, and then the television news told you to that this is the way it is. And so now, I mean, now you're the enforcement arm of this regime, the citizen brown shirts, turning in their neighbors. Or what we had
Oh
here
man.
was, if you notice this coming, these holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, if you notice that your neighbor has too many cars in his driveway, because then you should probably call the authorities and let them know it might be a super
Oh,
spreader event. And the people
super
who would
spreaders.
rat out their next door neighbors for having a Thanksgiving dinner with their family over there, it just reminded me of, people say, well, if I was alive in World War II and the Nazis were coming through, I'd have told them to fuck off. I'd have just stood up and said,
Yeah.
you wouldn't,
So,
because
so.
I watched how easily people caved, how they gave in, how they ratted out people that they, if you see something, say something. Department of Homeland Security they've always used that for terrorism, which is hilarious. But, it really took on a new feel during the COVID era because people thought that they were, the low status people can't compete necessarily with everybody else, but they can compete on one metric,
Oh
the
yeah,
obedience
baby.
factor, right? And if it's like, well, I'll be the most obedient person. I'll show you. I'll not only will I do what you tell me to do, I'll make sure I monitor everybody else and find out if they're not doing,
I'll
and
barely
so
make any money doing it.
I felt
Just
very
comply.
like there was a real Tavistock vibe to this, right? Like I think
Hmm.
that these social engineers know us better than we know ourselves. I think they understand herd mentality. I think they understand, as Epstein and Nowak were doing, population dynamics and things like that. How is the public going to behave when we insert this variable here? Are they going to comply? Or are they going to fight us on this? And I think that they made a lot of mistakes during this era of COVID, and maybe they didn't have their stories as tightened up as they would like to. But I think that in a second time around, knowing what they know now, I don't know that I think that we might be up against, a more refined problem with
I,
them, where they understand where the pressure points are. Well, we can't threaten them here because that doesn't really work, but maybe we can guilt them, or we can shame them, or we can, you know social credit score them to death, where it's like
yeah,
guilt
yeah.
by association. Your score goes down. During COVID, it was like your theoretical score goes down, right? The way you feel about things maybe changes. But in a technocratic Brave New World situation, or like the Black Mirror episode, where it's like, I can't talk to you. I have a good credit score. You have a bad credit score. If I even interact with you, it makes my score go down. So no offense, buddy, but sort of the end of the road for our friendship. And that, I think, is the most diabolical component of this, is that where this is headed in terms of a credit score system where
You're
you're
totally
either
right.
locked out if your score's too low, or if your score's high enough, you get incentivized. You get to rent that bike in China for a discounted rate, the
Hmm.
because your score is so high. But if you associate with that conspiracy theorist down the hall, well, then you're going to show up in the system, and that's going to ding your score, and you just don't want that. So it's like, how do you how do you quantify something like that? How do you measure what you might have said
Hmm.
that you didn't say because you knew you were being watched, or you knew your score was going to be affected by it, or you know what I mean? The most devious form of censorship, right? The self censorship of yourself. And how do you internalize that when I was going to say something, but I didn't. Well, now do you feel like a bit of a pussy? Well, you should. You know what I mean? Like,
But
and
they
how does
were
that impact your life?
they were only like that because the people who were so into it were so very into it, and they've got all of the power and control. There's like two moments: an interaction with a security guard in Chile a day before lockdown, and one that was a couple of weeks before lockdown where I'm holding a baby food, nappies. I'm in the queue, and they wouldn't the girl wouldn't serve me because I wasn't wearing a mask, and it's like I'm holding a baby food, nappies, you're willing to turn down, like refuse service of and essentials for a baby because I'm not wearing a mask. You know, that sort of idea. You're taking it right to the end. Your intention is to live by the rule, and those are the
Yeah.
people that um you know they survive for a certain amount of time before La Revolution gets them in the end, because it
Yeah.
all flips around again at some point.
Yeah, you're a
Listen,
collaborator. You're a brown shirt one day, kicking in doors and busting windows and enforcing these insane dictates, and then the next day the SS is there and they wipe you all out because
oh
you're no
buddy,
longer
me and
needed.
you, we're really good at like we could be taken in by the SS any day. I swear it'll happen. It'll happen. We look cute to those guys
I
eventually.
bet.
We got to be careful because we're the ones who disagree with both sides in that sense, because that's what we do. We kind of remain
Yeah.
objective, or try and remain objective, criticize both sides, and so we get all the SS. We get SSSS. There you go. Now you got, because you do loads of stuff. I mean, because you got, okay, Natural Blaze, Activist Post, Microaggressions, Union of Unwanted. You do what's it? Anarchapala. Yeah, you do that one. Do you want to say
That's
it?
coming up in 2 weeks. I'll be in Mexico for Anarchapulco, the largest anarchist conference in the world in Acapulco, Mexico.
Awesome.
I emceed it last year. I'm doing it again this year. I've got, um, I've got, it's a week long event. It's fantastic. I'll be down, let's be honest, being in Mexico in February is pretty awesome anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah,
getting out
yeah.
of where I am, where it's nice and
That's
cold, and
yeah, it's
getting to
lovely.
the warm weather. But it's really inspiring week. There's a lot of people that are doing interesting things, building outside of the system. They're not trying to fix the current system. They recognize that it's broken. They're saying, "Well, we could build something better, a parallel system outside of it." There's a lot of crypto guys there that are not not like the not like the Lamborghini crypto guys necessarily. These are like the hardcore anarchist.
Care about the infrastructure and what it
They yeah
means.
they,
Yeah.
they're about the mission, not about the money necessarily. I mean, I suppose it's nice, but they they want to build a different system. There's a lot of homeschooling, unschooling going on there.
Hmm.
Um, you're gonna health and wellness is health freedom is a huge component of it, and so there's people that are doing things a little bit differently. You can get like uh, people who can help you with residency programs. There's a great company that called ECI Development. I've known the owner now for a few years. They're building real estate projects in Central America and a variety of countries there. And one of the things that comes with it is like, you want to buy this house in Nicaragua. Cool. We'll sell you the house. By the way, they're the first developers to ever take crypto. So you can you can pay for your real estate in crypto. It's fine with them. But also there's a residency component to it too. They have their lawyers that will help you start the process on getting residency. And if you're not somebody buying real estate there, then they have this other side, which I thought was brilliant. They would plant these teak forests, and it's like a 25-year grow time, and you can buy a section of it, like a piece. Let's just call it like a unit of it, and it's an investment. It pays off over time. But one of the things that it also does is, because you buy this section of land there, you then qualify for residency, even though you're not going to be
Oh,
living there technically in a teak forest. But
clever.
so there's all these there's solutions. It's a very
Mm,
solutions oriented conference, because they recognize that there's major problems, and it's one thing to complain about it, and we're all pretty good at doing that. But then they take it the
mm,
additional steps, saying, okay, here's how we've solved it. you could do this and you could talk to this guy and you can, or you want to build a homestead. Well,
This
we'll
is
have
very
Curtis.
much how I feel anarchy is anyway. Everybody there's a guy who does something, he's got expertise in something, and you're gonna trade that expertise with something else, and
Yeah.
etc.
And the misconception though is that people hear that there's an anarchist conference and they go, well, what time is
Stinky
the
hippies.
what time is the Molotov cocktail throwing contest going on? Where's the tire burning
Come
going
on,
on?
no. It would listen, listen. If you wanted to up your numbers there,
You could do
then
that.
if you had Anarchy Olympics and it included events like that, it would be awesome. And you would get television coverage. You would get all of the morning shows
Yeah.
doing a piece about it.
Yeah. 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 Unfortunately, what
Yeah.
happens there is that the Molotov cocktail contest never takes place. But then
Oh,
the first time I was there, I was
boo.
all these buses, all these buses pulled up. I saw these three buses, and there were a bunch of people waiting. Like they were getting on the buses, and I asked this guy, where are they going? What are they doing?" It's, oh, that's the they're going to this nature preserve, and they go and let the baby sea turtles out into the ocean
Oh,
at night so that they
is
don't
that a
get eaten by
euphemism?
predators.
They let the baby sea turtles out.
No, it's a real thing.
It's
It's
a
in
nudist
this
colony.
particular in this particular case, it actually was what
Baby
they said.
turtles. Yeah. All right.
And so there's that going on, and we're like, wow, that's some anarchy. I'm expecting, like, I don't know what I'm expecting, but I'm not expecting that. And they one of the charities that they sponsor is the Marsh Children's Home. It's an orphanage there right down the street from where the event is. And they have the kids come, and kids will come up on the stage and they'll do some sort of like performance that they put together, and then they'll take buses over. You can go tour the children's home, and they do auctions. So whoever's a speaker there will say, like, if you're a writer, you bring your book, or if you're somebody that has a workshop, you'll auction off a couple workshops, or maybe you've got something, I don't know, something you can auction off, and they'll do that, and they'll take some half the proceeds from that, and it'll go to like the Marsh Children's. I mean, it's not, like, I think one year I was there, I think they raised like $80,000, which goes a
Mm,
long way in Mexico as an orphanage for these
mm,
kids. And so
mm.
there's a lot of really there's a lot of really good people there. They get
Mhm.
branded as being bad people because they don't fit into the current system, but
Yeah,
I
it
don't
sounds
see
like
that as,
a libertarian creators conference.
yeah, it's very inspiring. You leave there. I always kind of leave that event feeling two ways. I'm really glad I went, and I meet a lot of new people. I feel very inspired. I feel very comfortable that they're like, okay, smart people are working on some of these problems. They're coming up with these amazing solutions. We're going to be okay. And then the other half of me is like, I got to go back to the real world where this
Mhm.
isn't happening and deal with like the state and the inefficiencies of the government and all that. Oh, it's so gross. And so it's an interesting event because you'll and it's very international too. I was always a bit surprised at how that is. You get guys from all over the place. Of course, Australia's there. I mean, they're dying to get out of Australia, and
Asians, you get
Canadians.
Asians there.
We there. I did the peyote ceremony with a couple Korean guys. They didn't speak any English. I didn't speak any Korean, but man,
Don't need
you could,
to.
for whatever reason, we were able to communicate telepathically. I
Yeah,
think pretty much, sitting around a fire with these shaman
yeah.
drinking this peyote like
Aye,
thing, and you're like tripping out with the Koreans, going, "This is great."
that's
I,
good.
I, it's the best week of the year. It's a beautiful place down there. The people make it even better, and I'm real honored to be I'm honored to be the MC again. I mean, it helps because Jeff Berwick runs it, right? It's his baby, and when you write a book with him, then you sort of get into that world. And I've just been fascinated with it all. And the HBO went
Mhm.
down there and they did like a 6-part documentary series about it, and it really kind of painted it in a negative light. No surprise, but for anyone that makes it down there, that it changes their lives. It changed my life for sure. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
be you won't be the same person after going through that, and in interacting with all the people. They've got it at the right venue too. The first 2 years I was there, it was at this like resort hotel, which was beautiful and nice, and you could go to the gym and go get yourself a coffee and go to the pools and do all that. Now it's at a botanical garden that's down the street. It's a little bit more fitting for the crowd, and it's just fantastic. So I'm excited to go. I'll be there in a couple of weeks.
So, what podcasts are you doing at the moment? What type of shows and podcasts are you still doing?
What topics am I covering?
No, I'm still wondering if you're doing Day Zero.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm doing macroaggressions, which is twice a week, Union of the Unwanted, which is twice a month, and Day Zero, which is once a week. We do that. Yeah, that's the show that'll get me kicked off the internet for sure.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
it's a
I've been on
comedy
it a couple
show.
of times, and I definitely felt that it
Yeah,
was you're going to
yeah.
get kicked off the internet type
Oh yeah,
business. Yeah.
for sure. That's the one that'll get us canceled. It's Corey Hughes, Lindsay Sharman,
He's
and
a bad
Execute
man. Corey Hughes is
Corey.
a bad man. I got to tell you, he's a bad man. He's a
Yep.
clever bad man, but
Yeah, yeah. Corey lives not too far from me. We went to an event in Pueblo this last summer that was being put on down there, and we had a good time. And so he
yeah,
was my
he's a good
roommate for
one.
a
He's a
couple
good
nights down
one.
there.
Oh, I
But
can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
yeah, he's he's
He,
a he's great, but
definite character, that's for
he's
sure.
one step away from saying something that'll get everybody kicked out of the place.
Always.
Always. You just don't know
Always.
what's going to come out of his mouth. You know he's thinking it. You just don't know if he's going to say it or not.
Yeah, I've had a
And he
couple of good
typically
friends
does
like that.
say it. But I
Good. I'm glad to hear
appreciate
that's still going on.
I those guys are they're fun to it's a fun group to get together with and um yeah, I mean I'm happy that we're able to have these conversations, I mean for as long as we can. I fear the clamping down on free speech in the future.
I just
I
think it's going to be I think they're going to go all the other way. I think fifth generation warfare, we're just getting started. And I think from now on, it's just going to be abundance of information and you don't know what to believe or not. And some of it is going to be so well created and curated because of AI that we'll barely
Mhm.
be able to see the seams and we'll I could produce 10 shows and AI could produce 100 shows with me in it doing whatever I'm doing much better and much more entertaining. It's going to be soul sapping, soul destroying, mind breaking, mind bending. All of it is just gonna we are coming up to a time. I just don't think there's going to be any more of the suppression. I think it just goes the other way. I don't know where the
It
end
just
is
lets
either.
it just floods the market with everything and you can't tell what's
Flood in the
what.
zone constantly that you have. Yeah, I mean, that's what really, that's what Elon Musk and others and Jeff Bezos and like were doing a lot with the edge stuff is they were looking at how do we make it so that people just don't know what's going on anymore. And it's always been heading towards fifth generation warfare, flood in the zone. That was one thing that happened during COVID, is that they just put out a load of pro-positive vaccine propaganda out, and it works. But if you do that with information and you think about information theory and the way that you input information, you get an output from it. Once they're in control of the lever of information, which is now, Facebook,
Mhm.
X, everything like this, they can really start pushing it up. This is why they put in the nudge stuff, the behavioral insight stuff. I think we're entering into a time that we think is already started, but it's nothing like what you think it's going to be. We are going to be left confused, not knowing where we are. It's been amazing to speak with you. We've had a good 2 hour conversation here, and it's been awesome. So activist post, macroaggressions. What else do you want to point people to?
Well, I hope people will consider adding activist posts to their media diet, right? You go to a bunch of websites, you get news from all kinds of different sources. Consider us for it, bookmark it on your desktop computer, get it on your cell phone. We didn't build an app. I didn't want to centralize control into the hands of the iTunes store, the Google Play store. It's too much. They could turn it off too easily. They did that with Zero Hedge, and I just didn't want to deal with that. So you're just gonna have to bookmark it, the way you would open up a browser window on your phone and bookmark it. And I hope people will check it out. I think it's a great source to get information on the economy and empire and crypto and health and technology and solutions. We have one of the 8 pillars is, or 8 tentacles, if you will, is solutions. I think that's important to have, that people can find out. All right, great. I get it. The world's messed up. How do I, get myself out of it to the extent that I can? Go to check out the solution side and see what we have there. Natural Blaze. We're going to redo the website here pretty soon, or this year or some point. But it's alternative health. I mean, it's a huge area. People need to know that the pharmaceutical industries are it's a dangerous criminal cartel. They're all convicted felons. They've all been convicted in court of felonies for their behavior. And if you're outsourcing your critical thinking to the mass media, they're going to tell you everything's fine with, yeah, take the pill. Oh, you want to, yeah, we've got a shot for that, or a pill for this, or, you've got to break out of that cycle. And I think there's a lot of places where you can get good information, and Natural Blaze and Activist Post are places that have been doing it. I'm honored to continue and carry on their work. I take the task seriously. I want to make sure that I've got the right sponsors and the right articles and the right tone. And you'll get my sort of snarky, sarcastic, like, exasperation with the world through there too. It's there either in the podcast or in Activist Post. I tend to try and have a sense of humor about the unsettling nature of our reality, not because I'm dismissive of it, but because I think sometimes you kind of have to laugh at the absurdity. And I don't want everything to be so heavy that it's like, oh, here's more bad news. Like, if we can sort of laugh and mock them.
Oh, yes.
They don't know how to deal with that. I have found
I agree.
that's a real Achilles heel of them. There's no sense of humor, but if you can ridicule these people, they don't seem to have a defense mechanism for that. So we're going to do it. We're going to put the information out there. I would say that the reader of Activist Post plays a role in this, that their job is to then take this information and share it with people that they think will, understand it, will align with it. And there might be some people in your life that you want to ease into it. Send them an article. It's not you saying it. It's not me saying it. It's somebody else saying, hey, take a look at this article. What do you make of this? What do you think of this? There's a lot of, the people that are writing articles there's links to all of their stuff. I mean, it's well sourced. They do a great job. We don't get it all right, of course. I mean, we'll make mistakes in the future. I'm sure of it. I'm positive of it. But our intention is to make sure that we get it right. And I think that we'll do
good.
that.
I've always sensed that in you, and that's always come across in everything, all our dealings and everything I've seen of you, Charlie, is that your intentions are good. That's what
my intentions are good. If I get it wrong, I get it wrong. I'll own it.
Yeah. I'm there with you. I got you. We're never perfect, but what I believe that you're going to push towards doing something really good with that platform. I'm glad you got something like that and it's in your hands. And I don't think people realize how important these sort of things are for the future, because a lot of people, as they get their news from everywhere, they discover that they're spread pretty far and wide. So it's good to have something that aggregates and something that helps you find all of it in one place. Right, my friend, is there anything you want to add at the end?
It's great to talk to you again.
Well, it's great to talk to you as well. It won't be the last time. Hey, thanks for coming on the NEWSPASTE Podcast. I really appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed